Here is the management of the national economy in the global historical process. If presented in a generalized way, it looked like this. From the very beginning, the primitive community, the unification of labor existed, meaning they would gather, go for roots, hunt mammoths, and the chief managed all of this. Accordingly, there was also management of production and distribution of the obtained products. That is, the chief would say to this one, the leg, to that one, the trunk of the mammoth. That is, there was management, structural, directive, targeted, by the way, not unstructured, legality. That is, there were no lawyers at all, and there were no sons of lawyers either. But everyone knew the taboos, that is, the prohibitions. This is not allowed. And the people themselves did that. The community did not come from the community. This was unstructured management. There was no legality. Everyone knew how to behave. The boundaries of structured management were determined by communications and the shaman's ability to remember. Who owed what? That is, the limits of reach to the borders of other communities. The basis for trade was the impossibility of participation, of producing something themselves. They did not have such an opportunity. What example? Chinese silk. There were no silkworms in the north, so they could not make silk. Think of other examples. Or the impossibility of open military plunder. If it was possible to rob a neighboring community. That is, they went with an army, took with spears, bows, and took what was needed. That's how it happened. The balance of prices, that is, the cost, in mutual partisanship was determined by what? The balance of mutual partisanship plus the ability to exploit the neighbor and not be exploited oneself. This was the situation. And then, when the period of unrestricted free trade ended, the balance of these mutual claims of trading parties began to flow in the environment of state and mafia taxation, lending, legislation, written and unwritten. During the period of free trade, the balance of prices was established under the pressure of external social factors. But when state mafia pressure appeared, it began to deform. As graphically depicted here, to deform the free balance of claims, that is, it started to exert pressure here, to press. Thus arises unstructured management of the element. In quotes, there is no element, unstructured management, the element of the market, as the credit and financial system develops. The labor theory of value, everything we have reviewed, everything we have discussed together. The previous one leaves in the darkness of the unseen and mystery. It asserts that the price of a product is determined by the amount of labor, and the amount of labor is measured by its duration. But what kind of time is this? There is no understanding. But again, older people remember the amount of labor. There were many who worked at the Research Institute. And you know, at the Research Institute, they received 120 rubles and were dissatisfied, or even less. There, 100, 105, there was 120. It was more than 140, and it was there. And no one did anything. That is, a lot of people came, sat in the offices chatting. Only a few worked who really invented something there. But they also received 120. Both groups were dissatisfied with such a low salary. How to measure it? Always, whatever you measure it with, how to measure it? Jesus. With his teaching, he even rejects the theory of value. Why? Because he has a parable about working in the vineyard. There in the morning, one came to the owner of the vineyard and said, "Listen, owner, I need to earn some money. Give me a chance." He said, "Okay, do some weeding spray." And he went to work in the morning. Then in the middle of the day, a second one came. "Owner, I really need money. There are problems at home." "Well, come on, join in. I have a worker." The second one joined. And at the end of the day, a third one came saying, "I have trouble at home. I need it urgently, otherwise there will be problems." He said, "Well, come on, join in." The sun set. These three workers returned, and he paid each of them 1 denarius, the owner. They said, "Owner, how is this? You work differently." He said, "Well, you did the work assigned to you honestly, right?" "Yes, we tried our best to earn. So I decided at my own discretion to give you this salary for your honest work." And indeed, let's think about what the essence is, what the point is, how to measure it. In the theory of surplus value, there is necessary working time and so on. There is necessary product and surplus product. Here you came to the bread warehouse, and there are many delicious, appetizing buns in the warehouse. Simply draw a line between necessary buns and surplus ones. How to measure effectively? With what? You will find yourself in difficulty because there is no measure. And since there is no measure, it is boundlessness. But Lenin also said that socialism is control and accounting in contrast to Karl Marx. And since there is nothing to control and account for, this boundlessness led Marxism to collapse. But it took 70 years for this collapse. And now it took even less time for the collapse of democracy. Why? According to the law of time, it is remembered. For the ideals of pseudo-Christianity to collapse, it took hundreds, even thousands of years. For dark Marxism, it has only taken decades. And these democratizers revealed themselves literally in just a few years. You can see how they are leaving. All these parties there, various assemblies, patriots, they are creating fronts. It is already visible how they are jumping from party to party, by the way. They also cannot even understand that people will turn away from them. Like this Glaziev, he jumped, and ended up jumping from one party to another. But what Glaziev proposed, I have already told you. He said that Chubey says, "Suckers, look at how many factories and plants we built during the Soviet era. Let's divide a voucher for each and 2 Volgas with spare wheels." They divided them, gave out papers, and then created a situation where all these papers were sold by the people to those who knew what was happening for a kilo of sausage. These vouchers were going away. Now Glaziev, the economist patriot, he says, "Suckers, what are you doing? Everything has been sold off, but there are still reserves of gas and oil in the ground. Let's divide it into rent. Everyone will get their piece." Further to tell. That's all there is to Glaziev and all his merit. And then there will be those who will buy up all these certificates about the rent, and it will also be clear who will end up with them. I assure you, the laws are invented by quite specific people. They will invent them in such a way that everything will already be in place. Moreover, everything is already at the top. The global backstage belongs to them. So after this patriot Glaziev, the subsoil will no longer belong to us. And a bulldozer will drive up to your dasha and say, "Schnell, schnell, my land." And that's it. These are the kinds of patriots not understanding that we are speaking in the context of public safety. So, the theory of value. In Marxism should not be based on the quantitative nature of labor payment, but on equal quality payments for conscientious work according to a morally chosen management concept. Indeed, I am a lathe operator. I turn lathe from morning till evening. Next door, an academic is working. He is inventing a new lathe for me, and every day I produce parts. I specifically, I am doing, the academic sits, inventing for a year, and has invented nothing. He invents 2, has invented nothing. 3, nothing. By the 5th year, such a lathe that surpasses this lathe's performance by 1,000 times. The question is how to pay the academic who has been inventing a lathe for 5 years when he has invented nothing. That's it. Here is the necessary working time and surplus. That is such idiocy. So what is this? Arbitrariness. But arbitrariness can be either immoral or moral. That's all. Therefore, in Japan, the pay difference between the highest paid, most experienced worker, the company director, and the youngest is only 5 times. In Germany, it's already 15 times. In the States, it's 20 times. And here, they don't pay at all. Workers are indeed suffering. They work, like in Magadan, mining gold under the muzzles of guns for bread and clothing. And some are not even fed. like miners in the mines where they are on strike in Siberia. That's the thing. Therefore, it is pointless to talk about this theory of value. And the pine. We have approached the pine, grows in the forest. Is it worth anything or not? It is worth nothing. A pine cone fell, a seed fell, the sun shone, the rain poured. Nature, productive forces. The first productive force is the God of nature, who gives everything. And there a person invests nothing. A pine tree has grown. 3 men approach and say, well, shall we sell it? One says, let's sell it for 50 rubles. The other says, what are you talking about? Let's sell it for 1,000. And the third says, you fools, you fools. The pine tree. Now, if it's good, you can get 3,000. Remember how it is, moonshiners or whoever, operations I, 330, then this thug. To each, it's the same here. Arbitrariness, naked arbitrariness. Wages should be based on a fair and equitable concept in a systematic manner. Hence the question, what meaning should the payment for honest work indeed have to be a stimulus for good deeds and goodwill, so that people live with dignity? And the answer lies in this. The price of any product is a category generated by society itself, not taken from nature. I am saying that the pine tree has value, while oil lies in the ground. That is, price of a product is a human invention. That is, it does not exist in nature. It is a human invention. Yes, it is related to the duration of product production. Not through this invention, but through what? Through the management of production and efficient distribution of products in society. And again, this is based on distribution, which can be either according to this concept or that one. Natural objects do not possess inherent price or intrinsic value. To claim otherwise is Satanism. That is, I said, the pine. Seed, a cone fell, a pine tree grew. Everything is created for humans. And when they talk about the buying and selling of land and subsoil, it doesn't matter to whom. They are not selling the land itself, but the right to use the land. This also needs to be understood. If you set the task this way, then all this nonsense in the Duma about whose land it is will stop, about buying and selling, because you can't. What are you going to take it with you? Well, yes, you know, the Germans were loading it onto trains, exporting black soil from Ukraine to Germany, where their land is poor. So what, now the owner, did he buy the land, and is he going to transport it with him to another part of the planet? That's just nonsense, absurdity. The same goes for everything else. That is, the right to use the land is sold, and the people of God and the social category of the right to use the land is essentially sold. And this right is always a product of a certain concept. The right is law. According to one concept, there are certain laws, and according to another concept, there are different laws. That's why, according to this concept, we have what we have. And according to this concept, what a handful keeps people in a global prison of civilization in order to maintain the corresponding laws, we have examined them. If there is another concept, then there will be different laws. Therefore, within this concept, nothing can be done. And all the parties, they are all for this concept. They are concerned about who will sit at the top. Zhuganov, Tyolkin, Yavlinsky, or whoever. They are all supporters of the mass elitist system. This needs to be understood. Therefore, none of these parties achieve anything, because no matter what they say in their minds, they still want to be the boss. And if you want to be the boss, then you will invent laws that allow, as an official, to take bribes. Is he possibly going to create and invent such laws to maybe gain that opportunity? That is why no laws work, and they will not work. Therefore, we say that no private problem in the country will be solved. Not one. Everyone comes here. And you, son, nothing will work until we change the concept. That's it. There is no other way. And this is facilitated by the new informational states of society. It won't work. Someone wants to live well while everything around is in ruins. Sooner or later, they will come for you too. You can't hide in the forest. They will find you there as well. Globalization is essentially complete. Therefore, we can talk about the right to buy and sell. It is only about the right to use, about trading the right to use. Therefore, the question arises, which property do you support, private or public? This is what we are asked. And we, like that cunning Jew, ask, what do you understand by property? Well, how? So, whose is it? That is, give a definition of property. Because in our society, through another distorted mirror, there is a misunderstanding of property. That is, a person thinks that if they have a piece of paper, right, there is a seal. This is his property. From the perspective of the 6 priorities, I will explain it to you simply. Look. An apartment in the center of Moscow, an elderly woman lives there. She privatized it. She has the paper. That's it. Bandits come. They need to open an office. They point a gun and say, so, old lady, off to Butovo or somewhere in Solnechnoye, here's a little money for you. She replies, boys, how can this be? Grandma, we are going to have an office here. And the gun is pointed at her. Power and weapons. And what is she going to resist? Let's be honest. Come on, stop it. Here you have power and weapons. She is in control and property. Another grandfather like that in the neighboring entrance. Drank, had a snack, drank, had a snack. No grandfathers left. Boys, they pour. Do you want some, grandfather? I do. They poured, and in a drunken haze, he signed everything. And a person enters the house. You see these homeless people. That is, they drag the remnants behind them in a cart. When you start to investigate, this is shown on television. You signed it yourself, right? Well, I wanted to drink, so you drank away your apartment. Here you have the power of alcohol. Loan sharks. It's clear to explain further who the owner is. Here you are, an entrepreneur. You have a company. You need to update your equipment. To update, you need to take a loan. You go to the bank and tell the banker, listen, give me a loan. And immediately, the moment of truth, will you get the loan? Will your company exist or will you not get it? Peekaboo. So who is the owner? The banker who either gives you the loan or doesn't. It's his right. I want to, I give, I don't want to, I don't. What is your orientation? I mean political. If it's political, then I'll give. And if not, I won't. That's it. Or are there any other? And there are competing firms that tell them, don't give to this one. This one needs to be taken down. It's called competition. So it turns out that the owner is not you. Here's the concept of ownership. And even higher. Do you think ideology is not ownership? This Father Vissarion deceived and charmed people in the city of Sun near Minusinsk, wrote the Last Testament, and is posing as Jesus Christ. And people sell their apartments. I'm specifically talking about in St. Petersburg. They go to the city of Sun, then see that it rains there, and leave. He says, give me money. He says, that's it. The train has left, so there's no money. It's invested in the community. That is, lawsuits are ongoing regarding this matter. And it's even more interesting to say what happened in 1917, to whom the property belonged, but what ideology there was. Quotes on dogmatic theology. Rock-thrash revolution. And the landlords stopped owning. Do you think they won't do this now? Easily. Because now you understand who makes revolutions. And if you need to understand, here entrepreneurs are looking. No one wanted to create any capitalism here. Well, is it really hard to understand? He doesn't need these beacons like in the States. That is, a harsh fascist regime. And it was done to us from the perspective of entrepreneurship. A vaccination so that the people hate you, entrepreneurs like that. And it's heading in that direction. He would raise you and your children on pitchforks. And the end of all this entrepreneurship, and where will the people go? Into a harsh fascist stall. That's the thing. And now this is being instilled, which is why they keep both the CPRF and the Zhuganov supporters. Yeltsin says, I will catch you, pardon. They say, Boris Nikolaevich, they will be useful to us. He says, I allow it. It was Is it really that hard to understand? That is, economic processes should be viewed as management processes. That's what property is. Well, let's move on. What has been said should already be clear. Property is not just a piece of paper you have, or right now at the dacha, my plot. There is a piece of paper. A law is being invented in the Duma. The land tax is such that you are forced to give up. You have nothing to pay with. The land is yours, but you are forced to sell it. Another example, even simpler. The price of trains has gone up, and it is not profitable for people to go to their dakas, and they give up their land. They don't go because they are pensioners. Where to get the money? So who is the owner? Ownership is essentially the right to manage, and management is conducted according to a certain management concept. And in this sense, all humanity on planet Earth is the property of the global anti-Jewish mafia, the global predator, through the system of usury banks and so on. That's the whole tale about the white bull. But this concept is collapsing. According to the new informational state, what we have considered, and they are trying to hold on to it. That is, we are living in a time when this concept is objectively collapsing, but those who are in power do not want to give it up easily. Thus, the moment of transition. We will discuss this in the final lecture. In a broad sense, the content of property rights is the management of production either directly or through trusted persons. In a broad sense, the global level, this is the power of the world supranational financial mafia, the global predator. In a narrow sense, it refers to the forms and types of various properties. The breadth of property rights is determined by which stages of the complete management function are performed, over what time interval, in relation to which objects, etc. That is, all varieties of property rights are rights of management. And it is important to understand the difference between private property and public property. What is stated in the concept of public safety is that when property is truly meant to belong to society, but then what should it be? Here, when considering public and private property, it is necessary to remember that labor is divided into productive and managerial. And the life of simple producers depends on the managers. Therefore, the question is who manages? Therefore, with public ownership of the means of production, if the staff working at the company or factory can immediately dismiss the managers if they are unsatisfactory and do not meet management quality, then this is people's public property. And private ownership is when the staff of the company cannot remove their proprietor. Here is the essence. Well, definitions are provided here, which will be highlighted in the subtitles. That is, what public property is and what private property is. Therefore, now they talk about power and business, and they compare power and business, which is actually pure nonsense. The fact is that there is no boundary between property and statehood. That is, between business and managers, bureaucracies. Why? Because the club of billionaires is not even government officials. They are ordinary people of planet Earth. But they are the real owners of the entire planet and all of humanity. When Rothschild was complimented, "You are the king over all Jews," Rothschild replied, "I am a Jew of kings," because he subsidizes, gives loans to kings and heads of state, monarchs. He actually controls states through the credit and financial system, in fact. Therefore, speaking of ownership, the restructuring was an attempt at a strong concluding maneuver in the implementation of a long-term concept lasting over 150 years of transitioning from capitalism under the control of the amateur autocracy of the Romanovs and the national bourgeoisie to capitalism under the control of the transnational mafia bourgeoisie. And if we look at it this way, and since 1917 public ownership has never truly existed, this is what we defined. Why? It was the property of the party Soviet nomenclature. That is, mafia-like ownership, corporate. Let's put it this way. The factory of the red proletariat. Well, in the city, wherever you want. There, workers, employees, and so on. Could they gather and remove their factory manager? No. And what kind of public ownership is there? Exactly. There was no public ownership of the means of production. Even collective farmers appointed directors. They would choose, and then a new director of the collective farm would be sent to them. You've seen it in movies. And try not to vote. Everything was, in essence, probabilistically preordained. So we never really had ownership. And this was private corporate ownership of the elite bureaucracy, intertwined with a transnational Zionist Masonic mafia. This is evident for a reason. 2/3 of billionaires in the US are Jews. Now our list of billionaires in Russia has been written. They are all Jews. Khodorkovsky, Berezovsky, Smolensky, Gusinsky, Abramovich, and others. Why? Is it just a coincidence? There are no coincidences. 2/3 of our Academy of Sciences in the USSR were Jews or married to Jewish women. 50% of government officials, and now wherever you look, there's a wedge. This means there are Jews everywhere, or they are married to Jewish women. But it should be understood that all world Jewry is not because, again, they will say, here he is talking about Jews or something. Is this present in society? Yes, if it exists, let's figure it out. Because the managerial elite was formed based on Jews. That is, labor is divided into managerial and productive. And in the field of production, which is dirty work, who is there? Slaves. Dig, hit, hammer in the fields, and so on. And what about the Jews? They sing songs, Sister Dala, Pugacheva, Yoska Kobzon, and so on. But there are no Russians. Pay attention. If there are, it's just to dilute a bit. So it results in a strict classification, national oppression. And where does this come from? And you will rule over many nations, but they will not rule over you. The concept. Therefore, Jew, Jew, Jew.